Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Kanya, switching to my radio voice. And today I have with me Jack Miller, co-founder and CEO at Nettle. Jack, thank you for joining me today. How's it going?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here, man. Thank you for making the time.
Awesome, my pleasure. And we are recording on March 20th. And assuming LinkedIn is correct, you are in London.
I'm based
So
in London. Yeah.
London in March, probably dreary as London the great majority of the year.
You know what?
Dreary weather.
You've come at a good time. I think we're right on the turn into spring. It's starting to warm up. I mean, I don't want to say this and jinx it,
Okay.
but it's
So
been
that
quite.
that that makes me very happy in that InsurTech Insights London is going on
Yeah,
right now
yeah, exactly.
as we speak. And I've never made it to Insights London. I've made it to Insights New York. A few of my friends are out there, and maybe next year I will. I did get invited this year and couldn't make it work. So maybe next year I will. So hopefully the weather holds. But I'm very happy for Audrey and other friends who are there that they're getting good weather. Uh, so Jack, we always give the guests the chance to give the elevator pitch. What
Sure.
is Nettle?
Okay, I'll give you the elevator pitch, and feel free to cut me off if I ramble, right? But um, I'll start from a kind of basic level. So we work in commercial insurance, and typically in commercial insurance, before you get to underwrite a large asset like, say, a factory or an oil rig or a marine vessel, let's say, there's a process where someone goes out and does a physical inspection of the risks, right? And essentially, that process is like super manual today. It's called risk engineering or risk consulting in some divisions. Um, and it's reaching a kind of perfect storm because one, as I said, super manual, lots of inefficiencies. Two, there's a capacity problem. There's not enough of these folks to kind of meet underwriting targets. And three, they're all retiring. So there's a knowledge gap coming. So we built Nettle as basically an all-in-one software solution that brings everything a risk engineer needs to do their job into one place and leverages AI for those manual inefficiencies. So getting that time to conduct a risk assessment and give an underwriter report down from 100% of your effort down to maybe by 20% by leveraging AI. That's my elevator pitch. I think we're at the ground floor.
Fantastic. All right. So I am a former middle market underwriter in the
Yeah,
admitted US space, and I'm a CPCU. I have never played in the London slash Lloyd's
sure.
market, which of course, like most Americans in insurance, I stare towards London with longing and can't wait to get to. I've been to London, but before I worked in insurance, so I can't wait to get a tour of Lloyd's. Okay, so before you underwrite a large risk,
Commercial asset, yeah.
yeah, okay, perfect. You send a physical inspection. Okay, so yes, that's very similar to my world in admitted middle market, where very often we sent out loss control.
Exactly.
All right, so process is very manual, not a surprise. And I almost interrupted you at that point when you said there's a capacity problem, not enough people. I almost interrupted you and said, and I'm gonna take a wild guess that they're all retiring
Exactly.
because I literally wrote the book about this problem. Right now, my book is very US heavy, but not surprising that the London market has the same problems, of course. Okay, so basically, Nettle is an all-in-one software that helps the risk engineer do his thing or her thing.
Yeah.
Uh, it doesn't replace the risk engineer. It's an augmentation. It's a superpower.
Yeah, exactly. It's an augmentation. We see it really as, you've got these really talented risk engineers with loads of expertise in your organization. How do you kind of maximize what they're good at, which is time on site, building those client relationships and giving recommendations about risk? And how do you minimize a lot of that report writing, the kind of context switching to collect your data before you go visit? And how do you also make it a bit more of a transparent process for sending these guys out and kind of coordinating across the team as well?
Oh, and more of a transparent process. I like that. Okay, so the does it aim to make it more transparent for underwriting? or does it make it more transparent also for the client whose asset is getting inspected?
Yeah, so and the product today is more kind of focused on kind of internal operations, right?
Okay.
So think of it like a workflow management tool that leverages all this fun AI, and we can kind of go into that detail. But um, if you're the underwriter or if you're the head of risk engineering, at the minute it's a bit of a black box on like who's going to go out when and when am I going to get my report back, and there's a lot of emails back and forth. Really, anyone, whether it's the risk engineer, the head of risk engineering, or underwriters, can log into nettle and see what are all the projects underway, who's assigned to them, where are they in the process, and when can I expect the report back at the end of it.
Okay. Okay. So the main people affected by nettle or helped by nettle are the risk engineers. So the the risk engineers, uh, day by day, or a day in the life before nettle.
Yeah,
What,
yeah.
what I'm assuming, I'm curious what that looked like. We're basically
Yes,
dry. Okay, yes, go ahead.
I'll go for it. So, take a kind of commercial property team, maybe like mid-market to large corp. Um, Typically, you would have maybe one or two operational people who essentially have an Excel tracker, right? Of like, here's all my risk engineers, here's all the projects that I'm coming in. An underwriter would raise a request, usually in their underwriting workbench, that would get a trigger and get sent maybe by email to the risk engineering team. And that operational person will say, okay, Tony's free at the minute. Maybe Tony could do this. He's in the right specialty and it's in an area that he normally goes to. Hey, Tony, can you go out on site? Tony's like, actually, I can't because I've got another one coming up. Can you ring Jack? There's a bit of kind of friction there. Say it lands on my desk and I'm the risk engineer. I will sit down and I will do desktop research on the property or the asset I'm going to go visit. I will look at things like NatCat data, earthquake risk, flood risk. I will maybe go on Google Earth and I'll start looking at kind of, what is the surface area, how many stories, what is the occupancy type, and maybe I'll even read old reports and be like, okay, I think I saw a steel factory once before. I'll go read about that. There's a lot of like context switching to build that mental image of what to ask for on site. And then I'll organize with the client. I'll ring it up. I'll have to make a note in my diary. I'll go there and I'll usually have my own notes, is what we've seen, right? It's heavily expertise based. There's not much in the way of kind of tailored guidance for these inspections. So I'll either bring a full blank report and go line by line, or I will have my own kind of notes of what to ask. I will look for things like fire protection, exposure risks, construction material, usual COPE is the standard: construction, occupancy, protection, and exposure. I'll note all of this down. I'll say, actually, you know what? You're missing sprinklers in half the building. That's really important. We can't underwrite without that. I'll come home and I'll spend up to 2 weeks writing a report, depending on the size of the asset. And that will, the report will go to the
Oh, oh,
underwriter.
okay, hold on. Up to 2 weeks writing the report
Yes.
after the visit.
So in energy, so where it's a bit more complex and it's a bit more of a detailed report, say I've gone to an oil rig, it can be anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay,
Uh,
okay, continue.
Yeah.
That is
So
crazy. In my world, in middle market, it might take them a while to go, but once they went, I had the report the next day or at
I
48
think
hours. Okay.
and probably actually some of that is down to the backlog, right? So if I've got, 3 or 4 visits that week, I might not get to writing the report for another week or so. So not
Perfect.
not
Mhm.
all of it is spent like writing, right? But
Okay.
it's time to delivery. Um, so I'll write that report, give it to the underwriter. I'll also probably write a shorter recommendations report and give it to the client. So say, hey, I mentioned about the sprinklers. Here's a structured information for you. Um, at most, what we've seen is kind of structured questionnaire software that gives you like a template that you fill out.
Okay.
Nothing really on the market is doing what Nettle does, which, all of that great contextual stuff that we have in our organization, online, in industry standards, and everything I collect on site in terms of photographs or notes. Nettle takes all of that and writes the report for you with AI in your template. So I think that's where the kind of huge cost saving or time saving is, and by
Okay.
half.
so nettle grabs that, writes the report for you, and then you kind of edit it, make sure that everything is correct. uh so it reduces the process
Yeah.
of the whole thing by how much?
Yeah, so if you look at a risk engineer today, and this is kind of averaged across different risk segments that we've spoken to in different organizations, if 100% of their time on one project and you break it down into what the activities are, about 10% of that is productive time on site where they're leveraging their experience.
Uh-huh.
30% is upfront context switching to build that mental image of what to expect and maybe compiling some notes. And then 60% is once they get back to their desk, writing this long report. So we believe with Nettle and what we're kind of doing now with our underwriting partner is, we maintain that 10%, but now it's best in class because if you're a brand new risk engineer, you're the most experienced one, it's leveraging all of that industrial organizational knowledge and giving you the guidance. And then you've just got 5% of your time to read the concise synthesis it's provided for you, and 5% of your time at the end to check the report it's written. So gets you down from 100 to 20. That's enough time to do 4 additional inspections. So you're at like
Okay,
five
so
Xing your engineers.
5 is productivity improvement. Okay. Uh, okay. So that is, needless to say, life-changingly fantastic for a commercial carrier.
Mhm.
All right. Um, so based on LinkedIn, it looks like you went live with
Yeah.
Nettle about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'm guessing that the product is in some sort of somewhere between MVP and beta, and you have a couple of carriers that are in what are they POC?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Okay.
essentially. So we've got, I mean, I think what's amazing these days with AI coding tools, and I think this is such an interesting cross-section of like insurance and AI, but with AI coding tools, it's incredible the quality of product you can build this quickly. I think like we're now seeing a new wave of stuff. What used to be considered like a beta product is actually like a pretty impressive product that just needs testing, right?
Okay.
So so I think we're at a point now where, as you said, we're working with partners now to develop this specifically for their operations and then roll it out. But yeah, operational now for about 6 months. It was a bit of an idea before that, but yeah, the kind of kickoff point was about 6 months.
I'm definitely curious. We'll talk about the origin story.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what are the current clients? What kind of feedback are they giving you? What are they telling you that what is the effect that it is having in their operation?
Yeah, I mean, so the biggest one is like on some of the feature development. I think it's interesting. You go in with and this is why like partnerships between insurtechs and insurance companies are so important, right? You go in with a set hypothesis on like what the product is going to feel like and be used for, but very quickly as you work with the insurance partners and the people on the ground, that rapidly changes. So one of the really interesting features that they've pushed for, and I think is really exciting now, is the ability to speak to nettle. So say I do 3 inspections in a day, I can take loads of photos, great, and maybe AI can analyze those photos and say that's a sprinkler. But what happens when I come home and try and like, break up what site was what site if it's 2 steel factories in a day or 3 textile factories? So what we've developed for them is the ability to speak to Nettle and it will ask you back questions. So I can kind of offload a
And
load of the
by speak you mean natural language
natural language.
voice?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
If you've ever used ChatGPT on voice mode and you kind of speak to this like floating orb,
Okay.
it's a bit like that, right? So I will be able to say, "Hey, yeah, I've just got back in the car after visiting this site. It was a little bit bigger than I thought. It was maybe 20 stories high. There's 2 basements. I didn't realize that. There's, in terms of the loss scenarios, actually like only 50% of the building is covered by a fire protection system. Nettle is taking all of this. It might prompt you for some more questions, which are where it finds interesting. And it turns all of this to structured information to fill out the report. So that was a feature that we were like, oh, that could be interesting. But that's an example where user feedback was just incredible, right? I mean, they were like, actually, image recognition, brilliant. Let's work on it, but this would be amazing, and it's proved valuable.
Fantastic. All right. Um, what is the implementation like? And I realized that that might not be finished. Does it plug into my agency, into my policy management system? Does it need to? What is the implementation like?
Yeah, so I think it depends a little bit on each insurance company, as you'll be aware, like the kind of disparate stacks, right? Some stuff's built in high, some stuff's kind of common. Um, what's interesting about risk engineering is it almost sits relatively standalone, right? You pull in information on the client you're going to go visit from the underwriting workbench or the main database, and then the output is a PDF. It's a report. You don't necessarily need to push that much information back. Maybe a risk score is what you might push back. So um, the main integrations we do is really connecting to pull that data in, and then wherever your existing tooling is or your templates are, we just hand you the PDF back, and that can be going out via email to underwriters. It can be pushed back into a data storage that you want to use, but that's it really. And I think what's quite interesting is these insurance companies are sitting on like an incredible wealth of information from previous visits that's never looked at, really.
A thousand, correct. Yes, loss control. What was there, or risk engineering? What was
Yep.
there? They gave me that PDF. I used that to decide whether to
And that's it.
insure and how much to how much credit or debit and whether to renew, kind of thing. But that's
Uh,
it. That lives as a PDF. Okay, so what else can we do with that data now?
well, I think this is it, right? I mean, we're facing a moment where in the next 5 years, 40% of risk engineers are expected to retire. And it takes 2 years to get a new hire up to speed because
Uh-huh.
they have to do it through apprenticeship. So in nettle, we surface all of that information and say, okay, well, given this occupancy and similar documents that you've got in your database around this occupancy, these are similar types of losses that we've seen or types of risks, or often they don't have this protection. You should check for this stuff. And gradually, it's not only guiding the risk engineers, but it's surfacing that knowledge and using it to train the new hires that come in. So we see it as a bit of a bridge for this new generation of risk assessment.
Fantastic, and that is desperately needed. The carriers here in the U.S. are not great at transferring knowledge from the retiring generation to the new generation. I can't speak for the Brits, but I'm gonna assume it's similar.
Yeah.
So that is fantastic. Okay, so in the long term, in the short term, makes your risk assessment faster.
Yep.
Maybe
Faster
better.
makes you able to underwrite new business, more new business growth. Also, you're probably getting a better view of what's in your portfolio, so maybe
Mhm.
less claims losses, right? So it's
Yeah,
both elements of your loss
and
ratio.
and in the long term, we can start digging into that data that's being created.
Exactly.
Uh, all right, all right. What is the pricing like?
Yeah, so again, interesting topic. I think we're pretty early in that stage, right?
I
Because we're
figured.
working with our POC partners.
Hmm.
But ultimately, we roll it out and we test it and we see the value it brings and we make a decision that is, bringing value to both sides, really. So I wouldn't say we have like a set fixed thing because it's still early days, but
Hmm.
very much value based. What unlocks your new business underwriting growth, and then what is the time efficiency for you as well, and making sure it's a beneficial thing for both parties.
Fantastic. I love having insurtechs that are very early stage, um, on the podcast. All right. Um, origin story.
Yeah.
How I this is why I keep your LinkedIn pulled up while I'm recording. Uh, you've got your master's in engineering,
Yep.
and you end up at McKinsey for 6 years and have significant growth, right? Associate, senior associate, engagement manager, senior engagement manager. Uh, so how did we go from McKinsey to creating realizing that this was an issue
Yes.
within the insurance space and creating an insurtech?
Yeah, I mean it's a journey, right? I come from Ireland originally, and I went to study engineering in England. I studied at Bristol, And I always really liked building stuff. And I liked my course was specifically engineering design. There was a lot of kind of designing products, design and like delivering design projects. And I worked for a year in a startup that did digital manufacturing, interesting company called OpenDesk. Basically allowed you to download a piece of furniture as a digital file and get it cut out of plywood with a machine.
Okay.
And I was like, this, I really, really like startups, and someday I'm going to come back to this, but I want to kind of build out my commercial acumen a little. I joined McKinsey and really enjoyed it. I think I got a real wealth of exposure and gradually started to specialize in insurance and in particularly insurance analytics.
So now I'm gonna guess that that happened not because you were dying to specialize in insurance. You just found projects in insurance.
I think it was more, I was really interested in machine learning and analytics and AI. And for me, insurance is like the perfect like playground for that because, you know, the common thing is it's the only industry in the world where you don't know your cost of goods sold in advance, right? Because that's your claim.
Yes. But nobody. So yes, that I say that all the time. That is why insurance is so fascinating.
100%.
But unless you work in insurance, nobody knows that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
how did you realize that?
Yeah, I think from choosing projects that were AI related, right? And I was
Okay.
like, okay, I want to learn more about machine learning, right? I could see the wave coming. And actually, machine learning, if you want to work on that stuff, insurance pricing or fraud classification or all of these use cases are like perfect for it because you don't have to, shoehorn it into operations. People are asking you to solve it. So I found that like really interesting. I went during my time at McKinsey, I went to Japan for a year. I lived in Tokyo. Um, and when I came back, I was starting to think about maybe, coming back to that startup world and tech world. And I moved into Quantum Black, so the kind of AI arm of McKinsey, and I was working kind of scaling a team there that would try and turn all of this experience on how you apply AI to insurance into products. So a lot of it was kind of numerical machine learning products like that pricing optimization tool or fraud classification. But at the same time, LLMs were like exploding. So I was constantly in conversations with insurers about what does the future of claims look like with LLM, with underwriting. And eventually I kind of found this use case in risk engineering and also similar to like loss adjustment as well, right? They're related um, where I was like, I think this is so interesting because there's not much technology there in the first place, right? I mean, in claims and underwriting, there's actually quite a lot of technology that you can apply AI on top of, but this process in risk engineering is incredibly manual. So I was just a bit fixated with it, and when I started to reach out just through a lot of LinkedIn outreach to risk engineers and kind of learn more about the problem and the need for unlocking the true power of these guys who are stuck in kind of a lot of bureaucracy and admin, it just felt like the right thing to apply my expertise to.
All right. Fantastic. Um, what what can you already so I always like to ask about the future of the product, right? So we talked about what it does today.
Yeah.
What else are you wanting to build into it that you can already talk about?
Yeah. So, I mean, I talked a little bit about that upfront kind of context or briefing before you go on site, right? I mean, and essentially that is desktop risk assessment before you go on site. So, I personally am of the view that, yeah, I think physical inspections will be needed. I'm quite realistic about the pace of movement in the insurance industry, but I think at the same time, we can maybe raise the bar of like how much you can do without a physical inspection and save those resources for the real big stuff. So I think what's interesting is improvements in like geospatial analysis, like how much can we tell from new Google Earth data on a site before we go there, or even slightly further afield, there is a possibility of using drones, wearables, or other technology to capture that information and feed it back into Nettle. That's the kind of, 5 years and on view. In the short term, I just want to make sure we're delivering like incredible efficiency value for our insurers. And, scaling this maybe across different risk segments too. So starting with property and into others.
Fantastic. Jack, thank you for your time today. This is super, super, super interesting. And
Thank you very much.
there are times where we have an insurtech doing something super technical, and I just cannot get my head around it. There are times where I am able to connect based on my background. Right. In this case, I get it. Totally makes. I'm not a risk engineer, never has been, have been, right? But totally makes sense how the yes, if it makes my loss control come back 80% faster and
Yeah.
equally good or a little better, that's life changing for me as an underwriter,
Mm.
and for the company.
Yeah.
And then in the long term, being able to have all that data, be able to make better decisions from the accumulated data that is now usable, not just a PDF that was used once. Yeah, intuitively makes sense to me. So fantastic. So cool to have you on the podcast this early on in Nettle's history.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah. Thank you very much, man. And let me know when you're in London. I'll get you on that tour of Lloyd's.